Good night, viewers, and welcome to this another program of Breaking Down the Issues. This program comes to you every Thursday night from 18:30 hours to 20 hours. The host of this program is Honorable Shurwayne Holder, Member of Parliament and Shadow Minister of Natural Resources. Our topic tonight would be Guyana's oil and gas industry. Because of the importance of this program tonight, apart from the host, we will have a special guest in the person of Dr. Vincent Adams. Before I bring in the host and the guest, let me outline some of the areas in which we are going to cover tonight. But before we go there, let me just say that my name is Dennis Jaikran, and I would be moderating this program tonight. So there are 7 areas in which we want to touch, in which our host and our guests would be able to make mention of. But an important thing before we get into the discussion, and because we want people to know that we have persons with knowledge in this area, I'm going to ask at that particular time our guest to do an introduction of himself so that we see, we know, and we feel the knowledge of that person. And so let us go quickly into the 7 areas. We are going to touch on Bill number 7 of 2025, Oil Pollution Prevention, Preparedness, Response, and Responsibility Bill 2025. Then the second area, we are going to look at specific sections of the bill, sections 21, 22, 28, and then we are going to look at the Act number 17 of 2023, Petroleum Activities Act, and liabilities we are going to look at. Then we are going to look, number 3, at the decision of Judge Kisoon on the Oil Pollution Prevention, Preparedness, Response, and Responsibility Bill 2025. Then we are going to look at article by international lawyer Melinda Janke, Don't Sign the Bill, Kaichur News of May 20th, 2025. Then we are going to look at article by Christopher Ram, attorney at law, Kaichur News of May 19, 2025. Troubling flaws in oil spill law. Article number 6 that we are we are going to look at article 20, rights to assets and insurance clause of the petroleum agreement article of May 20th, 2025 by Joel Bagwandin. And then we are going to look at Guyana now disputes US $279.1 million in ExxonMobil declared expenses. So these are the 7 areas in which we would want to touch as we go through this program. We have a very short time, an hour and a half to do all of these. If by chance, because of the seriousness of this discussion, we cannot conclude, then it is going to be another day, another time, we would continue this discourse. So at this stage, before we commence the discussion, let me first of all introduce to you the host of this program, the Honorable Shurwayne Holder, Member of Parliament and Shadow Minister of Natural Resources. Let us welcome MP. Good night and welcome.
Good night. Thanks for having me again, or co-hosting the program with me. I'm always happy to impart knowledge, to break down the issues as we call it, so that the ordinary people, all Guyanese looking at this program, can understand what is it that we're actually discussing.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Ab.
So viewers, you recognize that I would have introduced our host in a very straightforward way to speak. But because of the nature of this discussion tonight, and because we need this particular topic to be well ventilated, I want to, at this time, I want to call the name of the person who is going to be the guest. But for purposes of this program, and for us to have a better understanding of our guests and the experience and knowledge in this area, I'm going to now welcome Dr. Vincent Adams and ask at the same time that he does an introduction of himself so that our viewers will better understand the knowledge, the experience of our guests. Dr. Adams.
Thanks, and good evening, Dennis and MP Hola,
Good
and good
evening.
evening to our wonderful guests out there. Um, I grew up in a place called Christianburg, Linden, and Alboiston, probably arguably, if not the two poorest communities and tough neighborhoods in the country. It comes very close to it. Anyway, I played cricket for Guyana, by the way, growing up in
Okay.
those countries. And then, of course, I was in the first class of engineers graduate from the University of Guyana, in civil engineering. And then of course, we were the 11 engineers who started the Guyana Water Authority. So we were trained specifically to start the Guyana Water Authority. And after 4 years, I migrated, went to graduate school, did a master's in hydrogeology, a master's in petroleum engineering, and a PhD in environmental engineering, and another master's. Well, I think I did two. So it's two masters, and then I work for a major American oil company, which is Amoco. You can see the books behind me here, the emblem. And then I worked for the U.S. Department of Energy for over 30 something years. Energy and environment, mostly environment, at the highest level of government. By the way, I was among the highest civilians, called the Senior Executive Service Corps. So we're the highest ranking officials. When an administration changes, they bring in the secretaries. They've got to go before Congress, but we're the ones who stay on, regardless of which administration says, and run the day-to-day operations of the government. Officially, we are equivalent to the generals in the military. So I was part of the, believe it or not, in charge of a lot of the nuclear weapons complex of the nation and science. The Department of Energy owns science, so we're the science owners throughout the nation. Like the national laboratories. So those are the kinds of things that I did. In addition to that, of course, I represented the United States on various international UN committees, like such as the International Atomic Energy Agency. I was chairman of, and this is important in terms of my professional career. I was chairman of the U.S. chapter of the Association of Environmental Professionals. It's an international organization, but I was chairman of the entire U.S. chapter. I chaired two international conferences in Germany and Kazakhstan. So I was on the international scene, representing the U.S. and doing a lot of stuff. So environmental engineering and petroleum engineering are my specialties, and it's a very unique combination that it wasn't planned that way, but it just evolved that way. So so that's why after I retired here, when the opportunity came, that's how I decided. I was asked to come back and serve for a little while, and that's how I ended up in Guyana, and that's how I ended up getting involved in the controversies here.
And so you are head of the Environmental Protection Agency in Guyana.
Yes, that's correct. And as a matter of fact, in working for the United States Department of Energy, also at one time I was even seconded to the US EPA, to bring that organization into what we call a high performing organization, because they were threats. I think it was under the Bush administration, to outsource government jobs. So every agency had to submit a plan to get certification from the White House. So I was specially assigned to get that done for two agencies, and the EPA was one. So I spent, that time to get it certified, and it was certified. Both agencies were certified when I was finished with my reorganization of the agencies.
And let me ask you this final question before we get into the discourse. I understand that your position then in America, in the United States, would have been equivalent to a deputy secretary of state.
Yeah, well, yes. What happens? Like us, these guys, they come in, or ladies too, but they're political appointees. We're all at the same level.
Right.
They, when you have an administration, they appoint the secretaries and the deputy secretaries. They're political appointees, but they come in and we work alongside them. But they leave, so we're all what is called the senior executive level. Of course, the secretary has his own designation, and but we were all at that same level. We were on the same pay scale, and everything else. Yeah, we same level, except that for the most part, we as a career professional would report to the secretary or the deputy secretaries, and every agency has a secretary and a deputy secretary who political appointees. So people like myself, when they come in, we still report to them, but we are the same level structurally. Because they come and go. So we're the ones who stay on, and we don't get political. We take the
Yeah.
same oath of office. They've got to go before Congress. We don't. But we have to take the same oath of office. As a matter of fact, if you see behind me there's a picture with me taking my oath. Um, yes. So that's how it works.
Now that we would have established that, Doc and MP, I think we can move right into the program. Recently, which would have been sometime last week, I think there was this big rush to push through in the National Assembly bill of bill number 7 of 2025, Oil Pollution Prevention, Preparedness, Response and Responsibility Bill 2025. There are a number of things I think we can hold up for discussion in this bill. The bill is 42 pages there, and it is a bill that was under the name of Brigadier Retired Mark Phillips, Prime Minister and Minister with responsibility for disaster preparedness, response, and management. MP, you were there in Parliament. And so take us through the bill and how is it you find that a bill like this is not really relevant and um, appropriate at this time in its
Thanks,
construct, so to speak.
Are you? First, I must say, the Prime Minister spent, you rightfully said 42 pages. The Prime Minister spent probably about 5 minutes just a second. Someone is calling me and obstructing my internet.
I thought it was the Prime Minister calling you to obstruct you there.
Yes. I was saying I hope they don't call back. Um, five 5 minutes or so he spent on introducing what he deemed or his government deemed a very important landmark. I believe Anil described it as piece of legislation, and he spent about 5 minutes just browsing through it. What I found, I too went through the bill. My first observation, I got internet. I had to. Sorry about that again. I had to cut off that caller. I'm feeding the internet from my phone because of the some issues with the home internet. Yes. Sorry about that. So I went through the bill in its entirety, and my first observation and I'm certain that Dr. Adams will agree. My first observation was that it seemed to be a cut and paste job from other existing legislation. If you check the permits, if you check the oil contract, if you check the EPA Act, basically 95% or more of what is in the bill already exists as law. And so there was nothing new there except to bring all these various laws together in one place. I don't know if that was the intention, but that is how I saw it. I know we will get in deeply into some of the clauses that are there, but overall, the bill seemed to be one to mislead the Guyanese people. It seemed to be one for a specific intention to, and that is to avoid full coverage liability, or what Dr. Adams, I'm sure, will speak on a parent company guarantee. And I think that is the crux of the matter with respect to this bill.
Okay. Thank you, MP. So, Dr. Adams, you would have
Yeah.
heard that, and I want to say, for purposes of this exercise tonight, that you are the expert. And so we give you an opportunity, having had this bill and what the MP would have said, your contribution at this stage.
Well, and let's first of all, I think we need to let the audience know why this bill is so important. To begin with, I describe it as probably the major scam ever that we probably ever see. And the reason why I say that is because of the potential consequences. What normally happens when these companies, these big major companies, when they come in, or when they take over an operation, they try to insulate themselves from all liabilities. And this here is a high risk operation. So what Exxon did, this is Exxon Mobil, the big company with the deep pockets. They formed what is called a subsidiary limited liability company to insulate them from the from any liability. So that subsidiary or child company, as I like to call them, it was Exxon Mobil Guyana Limited, EMGL, which means that they did not have any assets. So when they came to us for the permit, we told them that if something happens, who's going to cover an oil spill? And then, they come up with all these excuses. Well, we said, you're not going to produce a barrel of oil unless we get some kind of a guarantee that you are able to cover an oil spill. Remember the British Petroleum Macondo spill in the Gulf costed 145 billion US dollars. That's a lot of money when our entire national budget is what, $5 billion. So anyway, Exxon, of course they pushed back, but of course we said you will not produce a barrel of oil until we get some kind of a guarantee. And the arrangement was you take out the insurance, and whatever insurance does not cover the parent companies, which means Exxon, the big boy, Sunoc, and Hess, they've got to come together and cover whatever it is. So there's an agreement. They signed off on that in the permit, which made it law. They agreed to it. And that's the big difference, though. That's very important. They agreed to it under the coalition. As soon as the coalition left, it's like an insurance. You've got a kid, you take your kid to the doctor. Insurance may cover, I don't know, 60, 70%. That's what the insurance covers. However, the parent now has to cover that additional 30% or whatever the number is. It's the same thing. You take out the insurance covers a certain amount, the parent got to cover. The parent is Exxon, and Exxon got the deep pockets. Like I said, Exxon intent was to push that liability to a company that has no assets. So that was what we put in place. As soon as the administration got into office, they decided to renege, to drop it and remove, that aspect of it, and wanted to cap it rather than unlimited. They wanted to cap it to $2 billion, and that's what caused the lawsuit with with Collins and what's the name? Anyway, the two Guyanese, filed a lawsuit. Melinda Janke was the lawyer, as a matter of fact, and of course we know the overwhelming decision and the landmark decision by Judge Kissoon, and so that's why we're here with this whole bill, because they wanted to overturn Judge Kissoon's ruling, and they got creamed, and they appealed. They turned around and appealed the case against their own people's interest, because if you have a spill, like I said, 145 billion US dollars, even if it's half, we have no money to cover it, which means that EMGL, that has no assets, could declare bankruptcy. We don't have anything to get from them, and Exxon will be scot free. So we'll be left holding the bag. But it's not only us. The Caribbean could be wiped away. Trinidad would be gone. They would be the first from north to south, that east coast. But here, who would be the second? Venezuela's coast would be gone. And if you want to take off Maduro to give him a real excuse to cause a problem with us, that would be it. So that's the backdrop in this all, in terms of why people should be paying attention, because this is very serious. It could wipe out every dime that we have collected on oil and more, because I don't know how much we got in the coffers right now, but all of that would be gone, even if it's a half of the Macondo spill or a quarter of the Macondo spill. So that is why it's so serious. And what we saw there, and MP Holder is correct, is a bunch of song and dance, with no substance. First, they said, well, we're going to have unlimited coverage because, of course, we're getting close to election. So they're suddenly singing the tune that they have fought against this for 5 years, and now election coming on, they try a hoax to say that it's in there. And when you drill down into it, it has nothing to sort about unlimited coverage. So it was a big scam, and that's what we're drilling down in. And MP Holder said all they did was cut and paste from the EPA Act that says nothing. It just has roles and responsibility and process. They have not answered the question as to who's going to pay for the liability. Just mentioning, all they're saying, responsible party would be responsible for everything. Well, if the responsible party doesn't have any money to cover anything, all they got to do is declare bankruptcy, and that's all they keep saying. Responsible party has to cover everything. That was already in the act. We don't need for them to be saying, well, listing who's the responsible party, a ship or a drill rig. It says everybody under the polluter pay principle. I don't care where you come from. If you pollute, you gotta pay. So all of that was there already. So it's a bunch of song and dance to distract. So the bill, as a matter of fact, it's even worse, because what they're saying, they even have a clause in their clause 21 that says you cannot transfer liability, which means that, as you know, that the parent company, you cannot transfer liability to them. So it's a very serious matter that people ought to be paying more attention to. And when I hear that they're saying, like the vice president and Nandalal are saying, well, there's nothing, on one side of their mouth, they're saying there's no limited. And then they're saying on the other side, oh, it's unlimited. And then, and they're moving back and forth. But you see, that's what happens when you get caught in the lies. Because even up to today, Nandalal says, well, there's nothing such as unlimited liability. If there was anything as such as unlimited liability, we would chase away. We would chase away investors. Well, that's a bunch of baloney. Exxon signed it under us because they respected us. They have no respect for these jokers. Exxon signed it, and that's not what drives away investors. What drives away investors is when you're a level 3 that we are right now, that says because you shouldn't reconsider coming to Ghana. A level 3 out of 4. That's what drives investors away from Ghana. What drives investors away from Ghana is when you're not following the rule of law. And Guyana is ranked 76 out of 142 countries when it comes to the rule of law with a score of 50 out of 100. So don't bring this nonsense about unlimited is gonna unlimited liability is gonna somehow drive away investors. That's a bunch of nonsense. Exxon signed it, and because they know that they were getting away with what they shouldn't get away with under the this administration. However, they respected the coalition because they were willingly producing and everything, but they were following the rule of law, and they're not following it on the deal. They're even putting look. This government is allowing them to produce above the safe operating limit in the EIA, the environmental impact assessment, which is the Bible. It's sacred. You don't ever go above that. In the United States, you'll be shut down. I mean, never start back up. They're producing 40% above the EIA limit. And what that does, that that is going to put you at a higher risk of having an oil spill, and that's just because of greed. They were following the law again. They were producing at 100 barrels per day, and like in Lisa 1, 100,000 barrels per day. The limits, the safety limit is 120. So you produce at 100. That's what this EIA says, so that you don't even get close to the safety limit to risk anything. They're producing at 165,000 barrels per day. So that is the lawlessness that is happening, and you're not following the rule of law. So so that's the situation we're dealing with here. So now they're canceling all of that. What Judge Gisu ruled, which is dangerous territory. This is dangerous territory when they're using their one seat majority. They're betraying it. It's an assault in democracy. Just by that one seat, it's an assault in democracy. And this here is a slippery slope, because what this is saying is that they can overrule anything in their parliament that that comes out of court ruling, which is dangerous territory.
Yeah. Now, thank you very much, Dr. Adams. Now that we have another background as to this bill, number 7 of 2025, let us move to another phase of this discourse. And in the first part of it, I'm going to point this to Member of Parliament Holder, and then the second part of this discourse, I'm going to point to you, Dr. Adams. So let me put the first part, sections 21, 22, and 28. And I noticed that in the debate, Member of Parliament Holder was very vocal as it relates to sections 21, 22, and 28 of this bill. And so, MP Holder, if you can bring the viewers up to date, up to scratch, so to speak, on the importance of sections 21, 22, and 28. And to follow that immediately, Dr. Adams, if I point to you about Act 17 of 2023, Petroleum Activities Act, and to look at the question of liabilities. MP Holder, your first part, sections 21, 22, and 28. On those areas, you are very vocal and you are knowledgeable of those areas.
Yes, I'm trying to. I don't have the bill in front of me, but as I recall, the sections that you would have highlighted is mostly focused on the liability, which is the meat.
No transfer of
Really,
liability.
yes.
Cost
Which is
recovery.
essentially the meat of the bill, and what Dr. Adams would have been laboring on for the past number of years. Okay, yes, no transfer of
It's on the
liability.
screen. Yes.
Yes, but we can go back, and I want to link that to clause 17 as well, to 17, and where it talks about the responsible party. It's from clause 17 all the way. Okay, this entire section deals with liability. So in the earlier section, from 17, they defined who's the responsible party, because you will find them Anil, Vikram, Bharat Jagdev, all of them are now making the claim that they would have defined a responsible party, and it's very broad. The owners of the ships, whoever is operating the ship, if you rent it, whatever, you're responsible. You spill oil, you're responsible. But Dr. Adams, in his opening remarks, rightfully pointed out that this is already covered under the polluters pay, what do you call it?
Principle.
Principle, right? The PPP is already defined there, is already covered there.
The
So
PPP.
saying it's ironic, eh? It's ironic. Um, it it makes no, it adds nothing. It adds nothing really, or not, or very little. I should say it adds very little to say, well, if you're a ship owner or whether you operate the rig or whatever, if you spill, you have to pay, because it is all, there's already in existence these laws where you are liable once you spill oil in our waters or on our land. You have to pay. You are responsible. But the trick is, and this is what I outlined in Parliament, the trick is in the definition of who is the responsible party. And so you have to go back to clause 17, and it's on the screen there, which says a responsible party is liable for all damages caused. Um, uh, okay, that is not a definition. That is just who is liable. It is on page 9, where you have in the early parts of the bill, where you have the definition. So it defines who is a responsible party. And when you check that, you should have it. The operator should have a screen on page 9. You will see, especially if we zone into the oil rigs, because that is where the greatest danger is. It says the responsible party is the operator who's operating. Now, the operator in Guyana's case, in our case, is ExxonMobil Guyana, which is a subsidiary of Exxon. There is no document signed, as I understand it, by Exxon or any of these parent companies. It is the subsidiary who is responsible. And so we need to zone in on the subsidiary, what they own, their ability to cover an oil spill, etc. And again, as I understand it, they own absolutely nothing, because if you go to the contract which they sign, the contract explicitly states that at the end of your drilling activities, you close shop, you have to hand over both immovable and movable assets to Guyana. And so we own that from the get-go. We own the assets. And so you cannot use our assets to pay for a disaster which you created. You got to go into your pocket. But we're simply saying here that the subsidiary is not the one with the deep pocket. It is the parent company. Because if you have no assets, and Dr. Adams highlighted the Macondo spill, over 100 and something million
Billion.
dollars,
Billion.
that will crush
Billion, no. Billion US, 145
yes,
billion
sorry,
US.
million US. That will crush our entire country. The oil industry will bring about the kind of negative impact in Guyana unheard of in this country. Never before have we ever seen something which could occur in such a case. And so it is in our best interest as a country, as a people, to ensure that we get it right. We don't want an oil spill, but God forbid if something like that should happen, we will be in deep, deep trouble. And I am glad that you brought up the other clause. If you can bring it back up on the screen, I think it's clause 20. Okay, it's clause 21 or 28. Operator, if you can bring that clause back on the screen. You know, I like to have these clips so that the viewers can see it for themselves, because when these guys like Nandalal and others go out there, they say, well, Hole know what you talking, and Adams, you know, Adams ain't qualified. You hear these ridiculous things. Now, no transfer of liability. Let's look at it, folks. An indemnification or any like agreement shall be invalid for the purpose of transferring the liability for a responsible party under this act. Now, on the surface, this sounds good because it says it's clearly saying that the person who's responsible cannot run away from this liability, from this debt. They gotta deal with it, right? And in dealing with it, this clause prevent them from transferring. Somebody buy you over some arrangement and you transfer that liability. This clause is blocking you from doing that. But in our specific case, I just said to you that the responsible party is the subsidiary of Exxon, who holds no assets, who doesn't have any kind of money to cover any significant oil spill. And so in that case, we want the mother company, the parent company, Exxon, to assume the responsibility to take it on. But this clause blocks them. So it ties into this little child company, if we can call it that, and they obviously will go bankrupt. And that's the end of that. We will spend 100 years fighting them in court to get our money. And all while we have to find it from somewhere. We will be indebted. We will be in a crisis. That is the reality of what this legislation does. I know Dr. Adams would want to come in.
Well, go back to, let me put up 17 again. Put up that's number 17. Got this here is the silly argument that they're using, and it's important. Let people see number 17, so that when they bring it up again, they would shoot it down. You got it up? Well,
so in the meanwhile, the operator
yes.
bringing it up.
Yes,
all right.
Yes, it's
so here's what 17 says. And this is what they're using over and over. A responsible party is liable for all damages caused by an oil spill incident, removal of costs, restoration of the environment as far as practicable. Well, that's a weaselly word there, as far as practicable to start with, and for any cost arising thereof for commercial for connected therewith. Well, that sounds superb. Who wouldn't want that? But that's the whole point of the matter. The responsible party in this specific case is, guess who? It's EMGL. And EMGL has no assets to cover an oil spill. That's a fact. So it's one thing for you to say the responsible party, which is what Jagdi was saying. Up to today, he said it. And Nandalal is saying, well, you're responsible. It's like me, writing a contract with you and telling you that, okay, I'm going to loan you this car, and if you get into probably if you crash, you got to give me back money, and you're poor, you can't even, you don't even got $100 in your bank account. I'm not going to get anything. It's the same thing. So this whole thing that they're using, it's just empty rhetoric, and they know it. And that is exactly why we put the parent company guarantee in. And that is exactly why Judge Kissoon said, yes, that clause is valid. And it's unambiguous. So this here is the clause that they're using. And they're lying. By the way, they're lying. Nandalal lied yesterday when he said the man had the nerve to say He's moving from one part to the next. The man had the nerve to say, because I guess when you looked at the letters that were written, mine and others, when we said that they're removing the parent company guarantee, would you believe that that man said no, they're not removing the parent company guarantee?
There is a
So
video. There we have a clip.
yeah,
Operator, operator can bring it up, please. There is a
yeah, but
clip
the man is
on
lying.
parent company guarantee.
The man said it goes up to the parent company. I want him to show me where in the act it says that. He's
Let,
lying.
let's ask the operator to bring that clip up. I'm certain we have a clip with Anil's claim of parent
Indemnification
company guarantee.
or any like agreement, an indemnification or any like agreement, meaning any indemnification or any agreement of that type, shall be invalid for the purpose of transferring liability of a responsible party under this act. You know, these people have interpreted this to say that we are insulating the parent company from liability. This thing says an indemnification, or any like agreement shall be invalid for the purpose of transferring the liability of a responsible party under this act. Well, you have to know no law to put.
Well, first of all, this is not about law. Okay, this is common sense, and it's obvious that he doesn't have any common sense, or he's just a con artist. Okay, because if you cannot say that okay, you're not removing unlimited coverage, or the parent company guarantee is still there, and still have clause 14.3 that says it has to have a limit. His argument is listen. This whole argument is one argument basically. Do you have unlimited coverage or do you have limited coverage? We put in there, Judge Kissoon backed it up, it's unlimited coverage. They went in and added clause 14.3 to say it has to be limited. That is how they came up with that $2 billion, despite, and this was after they were negotiating it before. As soon as I left, they started negotiating that limit because they put in that 14.3.
That's in the
And
permit.
in the permit, 14.3 says that it has to have a limit. Up to yesterday, he is arguing about that 14.3 clause. He did it in Parliament too. It's even though he's on one side of the mouth, this man is, I don't know, just dishonest. On one side of his mouth, he said, "Oh, there's no limit to this thing," which is our clause 14.5. They added 14.3 that says you have to have a limit. And I've got quotes here where he says the EPA has some system of assessing an amount. That's what 14.3 says. Now, if you're saying that the parent company guarantee is still there, remove 14.3. But that's the hoax that these guys are putting. And that's the question that people need to ask him. If we have a spill, even if it's $50 billion, who is going to pay? Show me the process. Who is going to pay for it? The permit says, with the agreement that they have, cap it at $2 billion. And then he lies again about that. You know what the man said? To back up his estimated thing that you need to put. The man said that we should get the message because the appeal attorney imposed $2 billion, I guess like a bond money, while the appeal is being heard. That $2 billion, that was not imposed by the appeals attorney. That was the $2 billion that they agreed to with Exxon after Judge Kissoon made his ruling. So they defied Judge Kissoon, who said unlimited. They went ahead, made a deal for $2 billion cap. It's been all over the news. I have written about it. So what the appeal court judge says, well, okay, while you're waiting, let's show that $2 billion. That appeal court, the judge did not say, did that come up with that $2 billion? He said, well, since you're claiming that you have this money, let me use that as a holding, as a bond money kind of, until the case is heard. And this man lying and said that we should get the message that the appeal judge come up with this $2 billion to give us the message that it has to be an estimate. That is how these guys, twist things and try to con people.
Yeah. You see, limited and unlimited would pose a serious problem whichever way we go. If it is limited and the extent of damage is vast, then you are in danger. But if it caters for, based on unlimited, the volume of damage to be done, then you can be in a good place. But as it's now, we are not in a good place if by chance there is an oil spill.
Let me just to show you how these guys are. Here's here's Nandalal and Jagdio. This is before the bill was. They try to prepare people's mind, even though they've been fighting this thing for 5 years. Doesn't limit liabilities. No cap on liability to any little child. That means unlimited, right? So, but that's unlimited. Doesn't limit liabilities. No cap on liability. Emphasize. Then it says, but in Parliament, guess what they come up in Parliament and said? No limit and no cap do not mean unlimited. Now, how? I mean, which planet these people come from? And then yesterday now, as a matter of fact, I mark it off so that people could go check for themselves because a lot of people can say that this is politics. At 38 minutes of Nandalal, he said, where is there a limit to liability in this language? He's saying there's no limit. I know what y'all talking about. Then he said at 40.21, this does not limit liability at all. None. We said no. No cap on liability. None. Wherever the damage flows, liability runs with the damage. That's what he said. Jadio said that it was the PPP who always wanted liability coverage, and it was the PNC who must have met with Exxon and wanted to limit this thing. And then he turns around. In the same breath, these guys turn around. This is Nandalal. There is no such thing as unlimited liability. Then here's another big lie. At 52:30, he said EPA assess risk to get on it, how it is he said to assess where they should put the limit. We got to challenge him and show us where that happened, because you cannot assess damages. How could you know what kind of spill you're gonna have, and what is it based on to assess a damage? It has to be whatever happens, you've got to cover it. At 51, here's just foolishness though, in his thing at yesterday, at minute 51. Listen to this. I mean, you can't, you don't make this stuff up. That is why I marked the minutes so that people could go check. At this 51, he said, we don't put a cap, but it cannot be unlimited. Did you hear that?
Contradicts himself
We
constantly.
do not put a cap, but it cannot be unlimited. Then he said, well, in 14.3, that's what they think they argue this thing. So Nandalal is all over the place, and I believe is just a con game, because he's moving back and forth. You can't tell me that he doesn't understand what he's doing. But every time you see they're hooked on the no unlimited, and then every time they get caught, they try to switch back and forth, and they're wrapping themselves around the axle because of the lies. Yeah.
So we
So
think we are in a good.
before we get because this is something that we've been talking about in terms of paying for a spill, and because I think MP Holder started addressing it in terms of assets, and he's absolutely correct. All movable and unmovable assets belong to us. So it's foolish for you to say you're gonna, And I went after Jagger said if a spill occurs, we're gonna seize the assets. He said, well, they got about 20 billion, which is nonsense. Then he now come down to 14 billion. How could you? First of all, it's stupid to be talking about seizing your own assets. But even if it's 14 billion, if you want to indulge him in his idiocy, So you got 14 billion. You supposedly now in that 2 billion too that they claim they have, MP Holder would recall that the parliamentarian doctored in himself when the question was that he said, go to the EPA. It's readily available. They're gonna show you the certificate of the 2 billion. When you go to the EPA said, me, you got to go to court. Forget it. So we didn't even know we didn't even know if there's any insurance because they've never showed the insurance either, which is $600 million. So there's supposed to be a 2.6 billion in whatever it is out there, but nobody has ever seen it. But let me assume you got it. And let me assume you indulge, like I said, Jack doing his idiocy about this 14 billion. You add the two, it's 16.5 billion. If you got a $50 billion spill, who's gonna cover the even I don't even say the 145, but the $50 billion? Who's gonna cover that 34 or so $billion? Our budget alone, like I said, is 5 billion. That's 5 times our national budget. But that is the reason why the parent company guarantee unlimited amount is important. These guys are selling out this country. They're selling it out. That's as simple as that. And the reason, and it's simple. How come, the question needs to be asked, how come Exxon was following the rules under the coalition? And they never talk about losing money already. They were following the rules under the coalition. As soon as we got out of office, they start breaking all of the rules, breaking the laws of the country, the EIA I spoke about, the dumping of water into the ocean, and produce water into the ocean, that hot, toxic water into the ocean with oil, instead of re-injecting it with the international standard. The flaring, the unlimited flaring that we prohibited. So Exxon is taking advantage of them because they're a bunch of whatever Exxon feel they are, they expose them.
So, MP and Doc, I think we are at a very good point in which we can ask Doc to continue because he's knowledgeable in this area of Act number 17 of 2023 that speaks to Petroleum Activities Act. And so if the operator can bring up that part so that we can have a discussion on it.
I read it, before it was start, but I hadn't read it recently. So, but whatever they bring up there, I'm sure we could figure it out.
If he's getting some trouble bringing it up, we can
Yes,
move to the
we
next.
can move. We can move to point number 3 we want to discuss here. It has to do with the decision. We were talking about it, but we want to be a little bit more focused now in terms of the decision of Judge Kissoon as it relates to the oil pollution prevention, preparedness, response, and responsibility bill 2025. And so if we can be a little bit more focused on that now, on the decision, so that our viewers would have a better understanding where we are, and if by chance there is any area in which there is what you call in court where you fail to adhere to. There's a term, but I don't recall it now.
Well, the Judge Kassoon decision was clear cut, and that's what scared them because they know that this here is going to be an issue in the election. As a matter of fact, let me read what Judge Kassoon says, okay? Which was the landmark case. It says, Judge Kassoon says, expressed in clear, this is the language that we put into the permit. Judge Kissoon said, which for the unlimited liability coverage. It says it was expressed in clear, unambiguous terms. Such a course of action to violate the permit is made permissible only by a derelict, pliant, and submissive EPA, which has descended into a state of slumber at the critical juncture of an emerging oil sector and has, at every juncture, engage in a course of action to undermine and erode the terms and conditions of its own permit. But listen to this, and that the government, the government is submissive. Listen, let me repeat that. The government is submissive and relegated itself to a state of laxity and abdicated its responsibility. Listen to this part, thereby putting this nation and its people in grave potential danger of a calamitous disaster. You don't need more, not more than that. That's what Judge Gibbs will look at all the, you know, all the evidence. That's what it said. The government is submissive and relegated itself to a state of laxity and abdicated its responsibility, thereby putting this nation and its people in grave potential danger of a calamitous disaster. That's exactly what myself and MP Holder are saying. Even without, even with, I mean, the good judge used the right words,
Language.
but we are saying the same thing.
You
So,
know,
MP Holder,
Vince.
let me just as a follow up on that decision.
Yes.
Would you say that this here is an assault on a democracy?
Yes.
Remember, I'm not
Yes.
saying an
Of
assault on a
of
democracy.
of
Assault
course.
on democracy.
Of course, there are many clauses under our constitution which protects us, and I'm certain you can go in there and you can find tons of laws that are meant to protect us and keep us safe. And in this particular um, case that, or this issue that we're talking about a potential disaster that can totally eradicate us as a nation or affect us in a significant way, our livelihood, every single aspect of our life, should we have an oil spill out there. And so when you ask that question, if it's an assault on democracy, I say yes in the affirmative. I affirm that. Look, Justice Kisoon said it in plain words. I don't think anyone can say it better than that. Submissive. That is the key word. Submissive. A submissive government. What they're doing here through this bill is being submissive once again. Because look, let us examine what we're asking for here. The crux of the matter is that we want, in case of any oil spill, no matter how significant it is, we want to ensure that all Guyanese are safe, our environment is safe, the fisher folks are protected, our coastline, our biodiversity, Guyana is safe. And to do that, all that is required is a parent company guarantee, because we know that Exxon and others, their pockets are deep. Their pockets are very deep, and they would be able to cover any and every oil spill. And so what we want from them is not them going out to take out insurance. Anil gives this impression that, you can't have unlimited insurance because,
Yes.
what the premium will be, how high a company, and he tries to trick this nation, tries to trick the people. We're not talking about an unlimited insurance. It's a guarantee, a piece of paper that Exxon has to sign to say, look, once there's an oil spill and our subsidiary, our child company, the little one, ExxonMobil Guyana, who is the operator, who manages everything in Guyana, the day-to-day activities, once they can't cover it, we will step in and we will cover it. So they don't have to go anywhere to take out no insurance and pay no premium. That is built in within their company rules, and however that works for them internationally, that is already there. What they have to do is sign that piece of paper that says we will cover anything over and above what our little child can't cover. And that's all. And so we come back to that word submissive. And the question is, why is this government doing that? What is it that they are afraid of? Why is it that they are in cahoots with the company to do such a thing? What is the problem with signing a paper? You know, you borrow somebody's car, you come to borrow my car tomorrow, and I say to you, listen, you gotta sign this piece of paper. You damage my car, you gotta pay for it. Whatever damage, if you wreck the whole car self, you gotta pay for it. You gotta give me back a new car, right? It is just like that. If you sign a piece of paper, it doesn't cost you anything except if you create damages, then it will surely cost you. But if you operate safe, um comrade Adams, Dr. Adams highlighted the fact that they are allowing the oil company to go over their limits, and they're increasing the risk. They're increasing the risk. And if you increase the risk, we on this side, I mean, I'm not saying you, first of all, they're not supposed to do that. They're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to act, you're supposed to operate within the prescribed limits. So that makes it worse. That makes it worse that we are unprotected. While on the other hand, we allow them to do as they please. They flare as they please. They are running their equipment, producing 40% over the production limit. That says any right thinking engineer, if you're concerned about engineering, if you're concerned about safety, you are going to be extremely concerned about running 40% over. I don't care
That's
what
right.
piece of equipment you overhaul, you add some additional feature. Look, there's a risk involved. There's a great risk involved once you go beyond the design limit. Every and any engineer knows that.
But and let me add here, when I was at EPA, just to show you, and the one thing that it does, when if they have to sign, and by the way, what MP Holder was talking about there, that piece of paper, it cost them not a dime.
Yeah.
So put aside all this foolishness that you hear from Dr. Din and Nandalal, it's going to be too expensive. I just sign a piece of paper. The only cost is it for the piece of paper and the ink on the paper. Okay, so anytime they bring up that nonsense, it's not valid. But MP Holder is right, because the one thing, you get an incentive now. If Exxon knows that I'm on the hook if something happens, they're going to be more careful with how they operate. But now what they're doing, they're taking the risk, which is what they always do. They're taking the risk that if I produce 40% over, I'm making a whole lot of money. They're taking the risk. And that risk is, there are no consequences to this risk. Because if something happened, I already put my money in my pocket and I'm gone, because there's nothing holding me back. No, Dennis, let me. We're talking about this whole thing about here's what I put in my letter, which is what you brought up. This thing here is a betrayal
Before you
of.
before you go, Doc, before you go, as
Mm,
you are on your letter, let us take that now as part of the discourse.
okay, yes. So, but it's coming from you, so it's your suggestion here. You're the lead into this here. It's a betrayal of an unrelenting assault on democracy by the skin of their teeth, by the skin of the teeth of their single seat majority, emasculating the judiciary by fiat of the party's Putinesque authoritarianism way. And nothing was more despicably evident of this assault than the nation's chief law enforcement officer contemptuously retrying the case in berating the judge in parliament. That's what and MP Holder was there. The man went after the judge. This here, in any democracy, would warrant contempt of court in a real democracy. Listen to what he said. He said about the judge: unlimited guarantee is not an animal known to any legal world. Then he said, must we allow, and this here is an admission as to the intent that we were saying. The only intent is to get rid of Judge Kisumza. Here's the admission right here. He said, must we allow a decision to remain on record that doesn't make sense in law? Okay. The next part, he said, must we be allowed, must we be allowed to remain frustrated by an ill-informed decision by the court? He went on, it is a misnomer, and that is the problem with this ruling. Then here's the other part. He said, this decision distorts the law of the country and no investor will come into the sector. So those are the evidence, clear evidence that their only intention and motivation was to get rid. It's clear here. This here's contempt of court. This man was involved in this case, but of course, their dictatorship. But I think I don't know if I mentioned it, but
And
yeah,
immunity
but
of the parliament.
yeah,
Immunity of the parliament. The parliament, you would be immune because he
well,
said
that's
it in
true.
parliament.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But but at least he admit what their motive was. Very in plain words. That's what he said here. That's what he said here. If he said, must we be allowed to remain frustrated by an ill-informed decision by the court? Must we allow a decision to remain on the record that doesn't make sense in law? He says, this decision distorts the law of the country, and no, I mean, it's clear here what this man is talking about.
That is very, very clear. If I can just add,
Yeah.
look, the
Thank you
judge.
very much, Doc.
The,
FB, you are
the,
saying something there?
yes, the judge clearly instructed that there
Yes.
must be parent company guarantee. There must be parent, and this is what Dr. Adams just said. This is what he's saying about that judgment. This is
Yep.
what he is saying about that judgment. Ill-informed. The judge was ill-informed. So,
Yep.
in other
Yep.
words, he is in the parliament. Again, he's against a parent company guarantee. As at
Yep.
one time, they're trying to say that there is in existence parent company guarantee. But if you listen to them
Yes.
carefully, and so they are fighting that appeal, they're appealing that judge decision. And it's against your own people, against your own country. I should say this one. Even if, let's just for argument's sake, say that the judge was ill-informed, which is ridiculous. But this
Yep.
is your judge, makes a judgment in your best interest, in the best interest of the people of Guyana, in his own
Yep.
deliberate judgment, based on the facts presented. He said they're complicit. They're not honoring their own laws. These laws exist, and they're slumbering, they're sleeping deliberately to allow the company to do as it please.
Yeah.
And so they are. That's what the judge said, and he made judgment. He said there must be a parent company guarantee. Now the entire country should be rejoicing. We should be glad. Anil Nandalal, Jagdeo, everybody. This was a victory for Guyana. This was a complete victory for Guyana. And the PPP government appeals it.
That's right.
They said, no, wait a minute. That is wrong. The judge is ill-informed. He's wrong. There shouldn't be anything like full coverage or a parent company guarantee. But then, as elections time approached, they didn't throw away that appeal. It is still there. They come to the parliament quietly to hoodwink the people, to fool the people that, look, you're adequately covered. So don't worry, you're adequately covered.
Now let me quick, Dennis. I'm not taking this thing over, but there's some key things that I want to get in here. The Spill Incident Board. This is another scam in this thing to show how they're submissive. The Spill Incident Board. You know what a Spill Incident Board is supposed to do? Is to determine. They estimate. Let's say there's a spill, and you, Dennis, you're a fisherman, and you decide to make a claim because it wiped out your whole area with its fish and stuff. So you make a claim to this board, a 3-man board, and then they're going to determine how much money you can get. Listen to who the board is comprised of. Somebody from the EPA, somebody from the Ministry of Natural Resources, and guess who's the third person? Exxon, EPDF. The affected party, that fisherman, and part of the board, Exxon is going to decide how much Exxon should be liable for. And then they say, well, okay, fisherman, if you're not happy, you can go to court. So here it is now. This poor fisherman is going to go to court in against the behemoth Exxon. So let me give you an example. So that's another ridiculous thing to show how submissive they are. But here's another part. When I was at EPA, they had 6 small spills, and I just show you how reckless they are, how they're operating. So all this thing about safety, you know, when you buy like a hose and stuff, it's got a white tag that says it gives you some caution or some electric appliance. Okay, in the permit and in the procedure, it says you've got to follow those tags, whatever it is. It says when you use these hoses, you need to inspect it. Well, 3 of the hoses caught while they were in the water. They spilled some small quantity of oil. We send them a warning letter. Do you know within a few months, 3 more did the same thing? So we decided we're going to fine them. The maximum fine in the permit was in the law, in the act. Guess what the maximum was? And that's one of the things that I was going to change, was $500. $500. Do you know that they refused to pay that $500? We took them to court. And as soon as I left and as soon as we went out of office, guess what they did? They dropped the case.
Yes.
Did not only did they drop the case, they fired the EPA attorney, a young, bright attorney, one of the most brilliant young attorney that because you used to have attorney departments working on me, and this kid I would match him up against anybody in the United States. Also, they fired the young kid. Now he went to New York, and he's got a big, I think, at the UN or something. So the government, in terms of their submissiveness again, $500, we were taking them to court. They dropped the case and fired the attorney who was prosecuting the case. Are you going to tell me? So we see that they have no intention of paying anything, and this government is condoning that behavior. It's all tied in here. There's no intention to pay any damn thing.
So we can conclude that he who does the damage determines the price they would pay to you.
That's it. Could you believe that? Could you?
Which is a dangerous position.
That, and it's so barefaced. I mean, how could people not? I mean, that's so barefaced.
Yeah. I think we have 10 minutes more on this program, Doc, and I think we have a lot of. But I want us to point out on 2 things. We can take them together because there are 2 letters or 2 articles that I want us to discuss as it relates to what is happening. And so, article by international lawyer Melinda Janke, Don't Sign the Bill. Kaichur News of May 20th, 2025. And there's another article by attorney at law Christopher Ram, Kaichur News of May 19, 2025, has to do with troubling flaws in oil spill law. So because of the time, we have another 10 minutes to conclude this program. If we can briefly speak to those 2 articles as we know.
Let me go quickly with Melinda Janke. Of course, Melinda was the attorney in the case that won the the lawsuit. So Nadala cannot carry water for Melinda Janke. She is our most distinguished environmental international lawyer. And this man went and berated the woman because he cannot match intellect with her. Listen to what this man said. He said, Melinda Janke is hailing, he said the EPA Act, which Melinda Janke is in, was passed by the PPP in 1996. Well, yes, they were in office. But he's trying to let it appear as if it was their idea. You know what caused the EPA Act? Was the spill at Omai under them in 1995. And that was when it was decided that we must have an EPA. So it wasn't an EPA, and wasn't the government coming up with a great idea that we need. So that's the first thing. But here is what this man said. Here is what this man said. This man said, that long before we ever heard about Janky, this is in 1996, he said, long before she accumulated any environmental credentials, long before the Yankees came on the scene, long before anyone ever heard of a person named Janky, these things were put in the act. We laid the foundation for environmental protection in the country which she holds it. Let me ask you guys a question. Do you want to guess who wrote the EPA Act?
Well, Doc, you and I had a close relationship when you were executive director of EPA. And since then, I know that name. And you would have indicated to me that that was the person.
It's Miss Melinda Janky.
We have that
Janky wrote
video.
that act, and this man is saying that she was nowhere wrong. She
I,
has
I,
no knowledge. Melinda Janky wrote that. As a matter of fact, Melinda got involved. Miss was it Prime Minister Jagan or whatever it is, hired a consultant. The consultant came back in 1995 with the draft, and it was turned out to be a piece of crap. The IDB brought Melinda on board and paid her to go and rewrite the act. Melinda wrote that act. So all this stuff that this man he owes her an apology.
I want the operator to play that clip so that our viewers can not hear it from us, but hear it from the horse's mouth.
Yep.
His
put on the
criticism.
public
Operator.
record that, and she relies on the Environmental Protection Act. She cites that as one of the bases upon which she criticizes this bill. She says this bill whittles down that act, and then she says that this bill whittles down the constitutional protection which is accorded to the environment. Well, I want to make it very clear to the public that the Environmental Protection Act that Miss Janky is he and is acclaiming is an act passed by the People's Progressive Party government since 19.
He went on to say 30 years, almost 30 years. Where was Janky?
Yeah, she was
I'm happy that
nowhere
you
wrong.
said.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
And that's the
But you
one that
see,
wrote the act.
but you see, Dr. Adams, this is how they fool the people. If you don't know, if you didn't
Yep.
say it to the public, then persons might have been carried away by what Nandalal is saying. Oh, Janky is a newcomer. She doesn't know. She lives
Yeah.
out of Guyana. She doesn't know what she's talking about. But here it is. Janky wrote the act, and this guy is saying something. It's either he's not informed or he's being mischievous deliberately. Nobody can tell me that Anil doesn't know that.
Yep.
He should know that as the Attorney General and somebody who would have been a long-standing member of the very PPP. So I think he's being deliberately misleading, mischievous.
Yep.
He's lying to the public based on the information that you just shared with us, that Janky was actually the author, and you gave the reason why, the origin of that act, the contents of that act.
Before we, I know we running, but the one good thing that came out from him, and I know it's a bluff again. I have been calling on a lot of my letters that are right. I've been calling. I said I want them with their lies. I want them in a public debate. Guess what he said? Which is a bluff, and we need to call him on his bluff. He said, the man said at it was right at 1 hour. He said, these guys would not sit down with you and debate publicly. I'm prepared to do that. Let us go on TV. They would never do that because I would like to do that. Well, now I am telling him that I accept his challenge and I want that debate. And he can bring whoever he wants. He can go get the Exxon, whoever he wants. I'll debate him. And I'm going to keep bugging. I'm gonna embarrass him because I know it's a bluff. He would never want to debate me or anybody who's knowledgeable.
So we can ask we can ask MP as they are
That's right.
MPs together. Let him negotiate on that part deal.
As a matter of fact, you know what the MP should do? MP
Gladly.
should, when he goes into Parliament, is say, I've got a request from Dr. Adams there accepting I don't know what the procedure, you know, and put it right there in
I
Parliament.
surely will. Tomorrow I'll be in Parliament. Sure, I surely
That's
will.
right.
I surely
Say,
will.
say he's accepting, quote him, say, hey, you've sent out the request, and you can even say, well, the party, you said those by which means you're talking about the party, and well, okay, we have a representative to debate you in Dr. Adams. See what he's gonna do. No, I'm
And
serious
so,
because
gentlemen,
I'm gonna keep embarrassing him with this here.
we have 3 minutes more, so we want to be on time. So let us give ourselves a minute and a half to wrap up. And all I have to say is thank you very much, viewers. Thank you very much, gentlemen. So let us take the minute and a half each so that we can wrap up.
Who want to go first? I can go first. Well, something else that came up, and I'm sure the MP remember. Indar held up a document. Is the EPA, something from the EPA USA. Now, I've got one request from him, is that please do not wrap the PPP abuse of power, totalitarian incompetence, and disloyalty to its people in a cloak of a document. And I'm even sure if that is stamped USA, for it reviles the benchmark standards of the USA for democracy, incorruptibility, competence, and following the rule of law. So no veneer of holding up a document is big enough to camouflage y'all. You know what you're doing.
MP Hola, your closing remarks, please.
Yes, all I would say is that the topic that we discussed tonight in the form of the oil pollution bill, it's a serious one. I hope that we were able to highlight the flaws, the many flaws in the bill. I trust that persons listening would share this information. I trust that you understand well, and you would share this information, which we would have given you tonight. Look, we have a government at the helm that is corrupt, that is incompetent, and one that is hell bent on putting the interests of the oil companies and the interests of themselves first before the interests of the Guyanese people. And that is essentially what we've been discussing tonight, and that is essentially what is in this bill. And so I want to say as well that this bill has serious consequences for the people of Guyana, you, the people of Guyana, in terms of your livelihood and your existence. And the best way to counter it is to let your voices be heard against it and against this government. The best way to counter it is to let your voices be heard at the upcoming polls. We need to remove this government from office so that we can properly streamline our oil and gas industry to lead Guyana to new heights in the coming decades. We want a good future for ourselves. We in the APNU and AFC, I'm sure, wants to see Guyana progress in a way in which all of us can achieve certain things, but at the same time, we must keep ourselves safe. Whatever we are doing, we must do it in a safe manner because our safety and well-being is paramount. And so, again, I want to repeat that the best way to resolve this issue, because this government is not going to just roll over on this matter. They are going to follow through with it. They're going to follow through with this bill. President Irfan Ali will assent to it. And thereafter, they are going to follow through with the appeal as well to vanquish that golden decision, which gives us adequate or complete protection in the case of an oil spill. And so let your voices be heard on this matter.
And we appeal to the president not to assent to that bill. Because he's going to continue to hear from us. We ain't going no place. Dennis, I don't know if you got half a minute.
Yes, Doc. That is okay. No problem. Let's
Good.
go.
So the one thing I forgot, the other thing that they keep lying about is this capping stock.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
it rolls off of their tongue they don't know what the hell it is. But what it is, it's a big piece of metal, because you remember the Macondo spill in the Gulf. That well flowed for 8 to 9 days and they couldn't stop it. So what they did, they invented this big piece of metal, 50 to 100 tons heavy. So what you got to do is put it on top of the well, which means you got to get it there as fast as possible. That's the most critical thing to do. Well, so here's the first thing that Nandalal says. Oh, Trinidad has been operating for 100 years and they never had a capping stock. It's just to get this man is saying that Trinidad neglected to have a capping stock. It's that important. But Guyana, through the wisdom of them and their safety culture, they're going to bring this capping stock. Well, the capping stock was only invented just a few years ago. Guyana is one of the first set of people that is producing oil with this capping stock. The second thing is, so they're saying that they brought it in, which is a blatant lie again. It was myself and Dr. Bino who told Exxon they have to have a capping stock.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, we told them, okay, tell us what's the minimum time you can get it to the ship if something happened. They said 20 days. We told them you got to be out of your mind. So they said, how much you want? We said we want no more than 3 days. We looked at the locations. The only place you can get it there at that time was Trinidad. As a matter of fact, at first they had it to north. We said, no, but you got to bring it to south because you got to move it from north to south, and it might take 2 days because a heavy piece of equipment. We could not bring it out to Guyana because the logistics does not allow it. So we said, we also need a plan sometime in the future for you to eventually come out to Guyana when you set up, whatever you need to set up to get it out to Guyana. These people, we put it into the PIRA permit to say you have to do it in 5 days because that's where we were. However, you need to come up with a plan before you start producing the PIRA for 3 days. You know what these people did when we left? They went and tripled the capping stock time for arrival to the site to 9 days. So you've got an extra 6 days of flow into the ocean, and they're proud of that and bragging that they're the first to bring up capping stock, which is the first lie. And then the next thing that they did was triple the time. You think that they would reduce it, which is where we were going. They triple the time to 9 days to give it, because you want to get it there as fast as possible to stop the flow. So that is how callous these people are. They don't care anything but the environment or safety. So that's the other thing that they keep talking about. And the other thing that they talk about, that all of these contracts, that we were the ones who signed the first contract, and everything in the contract, the stability clause, the renegotiation, the commissioning clause, their hands are tied. So they don't lose an opportunity to say, we had these bad contracts. Folks, there were 9 total contracts. 9. Guess how many the PNCR AFC signed? 2 out of the 9. They had already signed 7 before we got into office. And what we did, I'm not saying that we should have done that because I was the first one to criticize the contract going back to 2018. We copied everything that they had. So all of these clauses that they know lambase, those clauses were their clauses. But you would never hear that when they up to yesterday is these every time they get an opportunity. As a matter of fact, we even improved the contract by doubling the royalty. They had 1% royalty. We put in 2% royalty. So when they talk about these contracts and how bad they are, every clause in that contract came from them. They were the ones who originated since 1999 under Janet Jagan. That was the first contract. And then they had 6 after that. that they sign, and then we sign too.
But Doc, you remember that cap and stock story? You made mention of that on my program when I
Yeah,
asked you a pointed question.
yeah,
And then I remember very well you said that geographically, the nearest point would have been out of Trinidad.
that's
And
right.
then you
I,
said that tonight. So to remind the viewers,
I want to
so
ask Doc one question before we close, and it just occurred to me. Because of the logistics at that time, you were looking at Trinidad. I understand that fully. Now that
Yeah,
you have this shore base at Videno, seems like a good place that you could put
it's
it down.
still
At least that's what they're saying. But
well.
but
It's
but
remember
hear
the
this,
one.
Doc.
Yeah, yeah.
Hear
Go
this.
ahead. Go ahead. Mm.
If I think that is where they claim to have it. Now, why, my question to you, with your expertise, why increase the number of days? Why has the number of days increased to 9 since you have it there on the foreshore, just ready to get onto a vessel and to the well?
And that's exactly the big question. Why triple the time and to just to say you bring it out again, and then even when they brought it again, because I used to follow, I'm following this thing. They said it was a temporary storage. A capping sack is not something you want to store temporarily. It takes a lot of material, a lot of money and effort to keep it maintained every single day because it's got to be ready. It's an emergency piece of equipment, but they're treating it just a, they come and they dump it. I want to know what is the expertise to maintain it at that shore base, because you know why they brought it there? Because the shore base belonged to one of their friends. I mean, you know what you should do, MP? Ask them what is the rent, what are they paying for that capping stock at
Storage
that show
fees.
base? What are they paying? What how much they're paying per day or whatever the rental is to keep that capping stock there in terms of maintenance and everything, because something it's got to be ready. You just can't have a capping stock and then when you take it out, it can walk in. They don't
so
care.
gentlemen,
They don't care. It's about putting money in their friends and families' pockets. You're gonna go. It's callous, and they're just gonna go triple the time that it's supposed to arrive. So for 6 days, if that well is throwing, let me say 100,000 barrels per day, it's 600,000 barrels per day extra. Oil is just gonna be all over the Gulf, all over the ocean.
gentlemen, I want to thank you very much, Dr. Adams. Thank you very much for your insight into what we would have discussed. MP, thank you very much also for your insight. I think we had an excellent program, so to speak. And to the viewers, we want to thank you very much. Continue to join us on this program every Thursday night from 18:30 hours to 20 hours. Thank you and may God bless you. Good night all.
Thanks, Dennis.
Right.
Thanks,
Thanks.
thanks, Shorwin.